Good afternoon, everybody from Athens. I'm very happy that I see so many friendly and known faces around the screen. And we had a similar event, some of you remember, last December. And the reason we organized it at that time was because we felt at that time that geopolitical events were climaxing somehow. Strange that 12 months afterwards we have the same feeling. So even a lot more so, judging from the events of the last 2 days in Syria. So I think that the present get-together could not be more opportune in time-wise. So we have an excellent panel today. The only person who is not going to make it is Mr. Mizuskovic. Stavri Dima confirmed this morning. And also Amit Mor from Israel has also confirmed. And I think he will join us in a minute. I thought that at the start we should be a little more general, and therefore I took the initiative and I asked Bill Gillett, who is running a very interesting program, as he will explain to you, from the EASAC. EASAC is the Association of Academies, European Academies. I won't say anymore. Bill will explain this. But it is a program which started a year ago and is very relevant to what we are doing. So I thought to bring him in right at the start, because he will provide a very good framework for what we're going to discuss. I will say no more. I'll go straight to John Roberts, who very kindly has agreed to moderate the first session and help also with the conclusions and the closing statements. So, John, I give the floor to you. We can't hear.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much, Kostas, for inviting me and for setting this up. I'm not going to make any major introductory remarks other than to say that a change of government in Syria, no matter how wonderful we hope it may be, was not something that any of us actually planned for. We didn't dare plan for it. So we have no real idea what the consequences will be, other than saying, in the most banal way, that they're likely to be profound, that it could change an awful lot of things. During the course of the afternoon, I expect we'll have various references to Syria, and I'll welcome that. But at the moment, I'm going to go straight back to Bill Gillett and ask him for his presentation, given his work on energy security, and indeed ask him how much does he feel the need that he's going to have to revise his work on this subject as a result of recent developments. So, Bill, thanks for coming here, and over to you.
So thank you first to Aini, to Kostis, and thank you, John, for the introduction. I really feel very honored to be joining you this afternoon, and I tried to decide what I should use this few minutes to focus on. Some of you will have heard a bit of it before, because you were at the Thessaloniki meeting where we had a very, very successful event back in the summer. And I know that Ionut and Kostis are both part of the team working with me, so I'm basically don't need to tell them what's happening. They probably know better than me, but I'm going to do a quick summary and let's see how we go. So the first thing, just for those who are not so familiar with ESAC, just to clarify that every European member state has a science academy apart from Luxembourg and Malta, and they're all part of ESAC, the European Academy of Science Advisory Council. And our mandate is to give independent science-based advice to policymakers. And the primary focus is the Brussels bubble. But we also, of course, want to communicate with the capitals of Europe, with the governments in the member states. We have 3 programs: energy, environment, and bioscience and health. And we're part of a much bigger picture because there are networks of science academies in Africa, in Asia, and in the Americas. And ESAC is the European member of that international family. So we have good connections. And in fact, some of the work that we do is then jointly done. We've done some work recently with the African network, and that's been really very rewarding. So in the energy sector, we've worked on electricity storage, decarbonization of transport and buildings. The last big report a year or so ago was on the future of gas. And now we're currently working on what we're calling the security of sustainable energy supplies. And what I'm going to share with you this afternoon is some of what's been coming out of that work. Just to say, what is the focus of our activity? Well, it's energy security. And the definition that sort of a lot of people talk about is it's an uninterrupted availability of energy supplies at affordable prices, because the cost of the energy as well as the availability, the two go together. We're very acutely aware, and especially after the last 24 hours, of the volatile geopolitical context in which we're now living, where we have malicious attacks, physical attacks on infrastructure, cyber attacks growing on, again, into our infrastructure and our energy supply systems and into our supply chains, and attacks on our trade as well. So this is a very unpleasant geopolitical context in which energy plays a very important role. But in addition to that side of it, there is also a climate change impact on energy security, where we're getting extreme weather damage on the infrastructure and the supply systems. And of course, we're also getting an increase in the demand for cooling caused by climate change and changes in the demand for heating. And for those working on modeling of energy systems, which we had a workshop on back in October, we realized that climate change is also changing our resource adequacy assessments, because the amount of resource that we might have is influenced by what are called Dunkelflaute, and I'll come on to those in a moment. But when you don't have wind and you don't have sun, and you've been relying on variable renewable electricity generation, you have to have a backup system to cover those periods. And we were looking at the modeling of that, and it looks as if climate change is having an impact on how long the periods are without much wind, and how frequently will they arise. So that's a whole new area of research, in fact. So the key policy options that we've been talking about are phasing out fossil fuels. That's pretty well a given now, but the time frame, of course, is a variable. And also a question is, do we really have to be so religiously precise that we're going to go to absolutely zero fossil fuels? Or is 0.5% or something going to be cost effective as a kind of backup option? And there's a lot of discussion going on these days around how you get a cost effective phasing out, which effectively deals with what we're trying to do, which is to reduce the carbon emissions and the impacts on climate change without hurting ourselves by trying to go in extremis. And then, of course, there's the big issue of our infrastructure. Everybody's realizing that the infrastructure that we used to have in many parts of Europe is old anyway, needs renewing, and it needs to be strengthened. And the last big realization is that we've been too dependent on people outside Europe for our energy systems and our fuels, and we need to be producing more of those domestically. So the 3 pillars of the energy policy discussion are security, sustainability, and affordability. And these things are totally linked together. So what I'd like to focus on for a moment is the important message, which I think is that we need to ask ourselves, why do we want to switch from fossil fuels? And of course, there's the climate agenda, which I've just mentioned, but there are also some very important reasons related to security of energy supplies. By switching to sustainable sources, we reduce our dependence on imports. We hope to have less conflicts in international energy markets because they won't be such a big issue. There should be less interruptions on a large scale because most of the sustainable energy systems are distributed, which makes them a bit less vulnerable to malicious attacks. And there's the big benefit that we engage with citizens with renewable energy, and that can help in many ways to get people working together to a common theme to deliver their own energy security and make it safer for all of us. And then there are the wider benefits, of course, of going to sustainable energies, reducing the risk of extreme weather damage, and providing bigger, new, exciting investment opportunities and jobs, and potentially reducing the costs of energy as well. So the European Union responded after the 2022 war in Ukraine began. They increased the target for renewable energy. They committed to becoming independent of the Russian fossil fuels, and they increased energy savings targets. And that was summarized in this picture on the right-hand side: accelerate the clean energy transition, diversify so that we're not dependent on one source, whether Russia was an extreme example, but we also have to be thinking about diversification. There's a lot of discussion at the moment on diversification of nuclear fuels because we're very dependent at the moment on Russian enrichment of fuels coming into Europe. So there are a number of things where we really have to focus on diversification. And of course, the more we can reduce energy demand, energy efficiency, building things better, the easier the whole security business is to manage. And last but not least, we need to manage smart investment. And part of that is getting money out of the European budget. But much more important to that is in somehow de-risking private capital. So I'm going to quickly look at now the areas where we can do something about reducing our demand, at the same time reducing our emissions, and hopefully at the same time improving our energy security. So the first thing is buildings. And here what we've realized, and ESAC produced a report on this a couple of years ago, building renovation rates need to go up by a factor of about 3. We need to be looking very carefully at the methane that we're importing. The natural gas coming in, a lot of it has much fugitive emissions, and there's a big potential to do something about that. And we've now got new legislation saying that it's got to be better labeled. And that's because, of course, on the 20-year time horizon, global warming potential is 80 times that of CO2 for methane. So there is a big push, and there's a big methane pledge across the world of everybody trying to do something about getting it clean, natural gas, the stuff that we're using. And we're importing, of course, liquid natural gas now from all kinds of places, and we really have to tighten up on the quality of that in terms of leakage. And that can be monitored quite well now by satellite imagery, and we know very well where the methane leakage into the atmosphere is because we can actually see it on the satellite images. So there's a big push to do something about natural gas usage. We've got 65 million gas boilers across Europe, and many countries are now moving towards banning or restricting or in some way legislating to cut back on the use of gas boilers for heating buildings. And what's very clear is that if we can use renewable energy or other sustainable energy together with heat pumps, we can greatly reduce the actual amount of energy that we need to keep ourselves warm and comfortable. Then there's the transport sector. We have a big potential for improving energy security through the transport sector, which is a big energy consumer, by avoiding motorized travel, by shifting to more environmentally friendly modes like cycling and using the new mobility services which are around. And we can improve the performance of the existing vehicles. And all those things will reduce demand and in that way contribute to our improvements of energy security. For the industrial sector, I'm just going to flag one area, which is the use of hydrogen, which, well, and the e-fuels as well, because these have a potential. I mean, hydrogen is an energy carrier like electricity. There will be a massive increase in electrification, but there will be also a big increase, I think everybody's expecting it, in hydrogen, though from what I can understand in the last, let's say, half a year or maybe even the last year, some of the dreaming about the future of the hydrogen economy is beginning to hit the sort of, let's say, the buffers of credibility. We have to be realistic about what can and can't be achieved with hydrogen. It is going to be expensive. It's going to be used primarily in hard to electrify applications. And like methane, hydrogen also has a significant global warming potential. It's 30 times that of CO2. So we need to be cautious about how we manage the use of hydrogen and what we do with it. And the dreams about blending it with natural gas in the gas networks across Europe, I think were already discussed 20 years ago or more by the International Energy Agency, but we have been reinforcing the message that blending is not a big solution for greenhouse gas reduction. We won't get more than 10, 12% hydrogen in the gas networks within the regulatory framework that people really believe is possible. And that means we could potentially reduce the emissions by 1%. So the saving from the blending of hydrogen is really not attractive enough to justify the investment. There will be potential for using bioenergy, and bioenergy resources, of course, everybody wants to use bioenergy for different things. They have multiple potential uses. And for solid bioenergy, there's been quite a lot of concern because some countries have been saying, yes, we won't burn coal, we'll just put wood on the fire. And that will give us our electricity generation. And I think what's very clear is that first of all, we don't have the resources to do that. And secondly, it's not a very intelligent thing to do because the time that it takes to grow a tree is much longer than the time we have to limit our global warming to even to 2 degrees. So we need to be looking at using biomass in ways which are environmentally valuable, economically valuable. And that means you begin with long lifetime wood-based products like construction timber or engineered wood. There's a fantastic potential for using more wood in the building sector. And then we reuse and recycle that wood, and we don't actually burn it until we've really had a good use out of it. And that might be 50 or 100 or 150 or more years into the future before we want to use it for energy. We certainly shouldn't be cutting down trees and burning them now. And if we want to replace our gas boilers with something, then it's better to use renewable electricity and heat pumps than to try to do it with biomass boilers, with a few exceptions. If you have very significant locally available wood that you can use for domestic heating and this kind of thing, fine. But on power stations, what we've seen is a crazy world where we're importing massive quantities of wood pellets across the world and burning them because the rules allow us to, because we still say that if your tree is cut down in America, then the carbon emissions belong to the Americans. And if you burn them in Athens, it doesn't do anything to the Athens balance of carbon emissions because it's all done in America. That kind of crazy argument, they are trying to tackle that in Brussels with the new regulations on how we manage our emissions. But I think we've still got some learning to do amongst many politicians on that issue. So looking at the issue of, as I mentioned at the beginning, cost affordability of energy is part of the energy security agenda. We need to be able to have not only energy that we can use, but energy that people can afford to use. And that brings us to two groups which need special support. One are the vulnerable groups and households who have very low incomes and cannot afford to pay for energy, whether it's fossil or renewable. And the other, of course, are our strategic industries, which also need to be supported to be sure that we don't limit what we can do strategically by them not being able to afford their energy supplies. And for that, we need funding to help, particularly the vulnerable groups, to invest in reducing their energy needs, and to some extent also to help them pay for their energy bills. But it's much wiser, of course, to use public funding to reduce the energy bills through energy efficiency and switching their systems to use less energy, renovating their buildings and this kind of thing, than it is just to pay high energy bills. That doesn't make a lot of sense. That's a long-term bad idea. So I'm going to try to summarize now. There are two things that I'm going to show you for the first time, and I'll be interested in your thoughts about them. One is this picture of the future energy scenarios summarized by what's going to decrease and what's going to increase. What we're expecting to decrease is the use of fossil fuels, the greenhouse gas emissions, also the embodied energy emissions. So we're going to be trying to encourage the use of wood, for example, instead of steel and cement in buildings. We're expecting to see decreases in energy conversion losses because we will have less fossil fuels going through all the primary energy to final energy conversion processes. And we'll probably see less waste heat. It'll be reused. What's going up, unfortunately, what's increasing is geopolitical volatility, cyber attacks, which are really exploding at the moment. It's quite worrying. We've got a couple of experts on our working group on the cyber side, and this is quite concerning to me to see what's happening there. We're expecting to see an increase in extreme weather and in the climate change. That's not going to stop. What we're seeing also is societal tensions increasing, and we need to be very cautious not to somehow make that worse by the way that we manage our energy transition. It requires a lot of communication and understanding and careful thought about how we manage our energy transition to be sure that we do it without creating societal tensions. On the electricity side, which, as I mentioned, will be the dominant energy carrier in Europe in the coming years, I mean, we will definitely, as we phase out gas and oil, electricity is going to have a much bigger role than it's had in the past. And that's going to need grid flexibility management much more than we had before. By that, I mean storage, interconnections between countries, demand response mechanisms, time-dependent tariffs. These kind of things are going to have to be much more widely adopted, and managing the peak demand as well. That's going to be a crucial thing to manage. And last but not least, I would say, perhaps I should have put it first, we've got to finance all this somehow. And whilst we can see that the sums come out really well, if you look over a 15, 20-year lifetime, it's definitely cheaper and more interesting to go for the sustainable solutions. We have a very high upfront cost of investment to get these things off the ground. And that implies a need for big support from the financing community. They've got to have, it's interesting and exciting that it actually matches what most of us want in terms of a pension. We're happy to pay in for a number of years and we want the money out at the end. It's the same kind of time frame that we want to somehow get some capital up front into the sustainable energy system investments, and then we'll get a nice return over plenty of years. So these two match quite well, and we have to capitalize on that benefit. Then the last thing I wanted to show, and I'm nearly there, Kostis, I think we should be on time, is a few thoughts about what I would call system and technology investments. What am I talking about here? Well, essentially, we need to be investing in cyber protection. in electrification of all the three main sectors, in variable renewable electricity generation. Most countries seem to want to go down that way. Even those, and perhaps we'll come back to this, that want to maintain and perhaps even expand their nuclear power, most of them also recognize that with the time it takes to get new nuclear generators built and the way that things are evolving, it makes sense to also have variable renewable electricity generation. And this will be very different country by country. Then we have the infrastructure. We really need to strengthen that. There will be heat storage and electricity storage, and they will be linked. We will have excess renewable electricity being stored as heat and used later on for heating processes and buildings. There's a whole new agenda on green hydrogen and e-fuels. There's a big question mark and a lot of, I don't know quite, I was trying to think of how this is going. I mean, the nuclear generation argument is a strange thing across Europe. We've got two big clubs. There's the Nuclear Alliance on the one hand, and the Friends of Renewables on the other. It's a bit like having the vegetarians and the meat eaters. The vegetarians eat a little bit of meat, but they don't want much. And the meat eaters eat a little bit of vegetables, but they don't like them much. Somehow they have to live together, and we have to see that across Europe we will have quite a different. Some will have a lot of nuclear, France, for example, and others much less. But who knows who's going to go which way? And it's really a question of, again, investment strategy, because nuclear is very high upfront cost, as is renewables, and we need to see how that's going to pan out. Some parts of Europe will have carbon capture and storage. We're beginning to see a bit of this emerge, but it's still very early days. The costs are far from obvious. We'll have to see how that's going to go. And last but not least, the circular economy is something which can help with our energy security, and we need to be looking at how we strengthen that. Then we've been looking at the electricity market design, and we've extended this a little bit to talk about energy market design. We need the backup generation, we need the demand response, and we need energy market integration. These things are all important, and I think there is more work to be done on the European Union's current market design issues, and we'll be flagging some of those in our report. Then we've mentioned diversification, coordination of purchasing, and I mentioned we need to be worrying not only about how we buy fossil fuels in the next few months, but how we buy renewable fuels in the future, and how we buy enriched uranium in the longer term. And there's quite a lot of change happening in that sector, I believe. And last but not least, there's got to be protection for our critical infrastructure, and that brings the link between energy security and military security. So here's my last slide. I would say energy security, we can't avoid the phase out of fossil fuels. We have to do that. We have to invest in energy efficiency, renewables, and infrastructure. And we have to prepare for what is demonstrably much more volatile geopolitics with more cyber and malicious attacks. In parallel, and actually supporting each other, interlinked and benefiting each other, investments in sustainability to reduce the emissions actually help with security as well. So global leadership by Europe is important. In the bigger picture of global carbon emissions, Europe is, I don't know, 6 or 7%. So it's a small amount in terms of what we're adding to the amount of that carbon in the atmosphere. And that's why there's a little bit of a question of whether we really go down to zero carbon emissions, or whether a couple of percent might not be a disaster, because it would be such a tiny part of the big picture. But we need to help others to follow. And that was the big discussion at COP29, of course. And then for sustainable energies, we have to recognize that will benefit everybody. And then there's the affordability question. As I said, we've got to prioritize what can be purchased in terms of energy efficiency and renewable. They're the low-cost, proven options. To do that effectively, we need the support of everybody. We need political support. That means communicating with consumers and helping our strategic industries and vulnerable groups. So my hope is that the science academies through ESAC, providing scientific evidence and arguments, will help to build investor confidence and move us to a more secure energy future in Europe. Thank you very much.
We thank you very much, Bill. And I think you have managed in a very short period of time to put together all the different angles of energy security. And it provides an excellent background for our discussion. And we heard with, very useful the ups and the downs, which you presented at the end of what is going to go up and what is going to go down. I think this puts in a nutshell the challenges which we are facing. And really, we thank you very much. I give the floor to John. John?
Thank you very much,
Good.
Costas.
Okay.
I was very impressed by what you were saying, Bill, and I thought it was, as Costas said, an excellent summation and indeed a lot of deep analysis there as well. I was going to ask you one question because I thought there should be some more questions. My question to you is a simple one. You mentioned the need to save energy, to reduce energy demand. In my country, in Britain, we have had countless different energy efficiency drives. How do you currently rate Europe's moves to make energy efficiency affordable for ordinary consumers? In other words, things like insulating homes or getting industries to use their energy more efficiently.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, John, and thank you for the question. What can I say? I think it's well publicized and well known that Europe is behind its energy efficiency goals and targets. We're not delivering what we should. What's clear to me is that part of that is communication, and my belief is that when we try to explain how reducing demand will help us with our security of energy and recognizing the very volatile context in which we're living at the moment, I'm hoping that the motivation to improve our energy security will motivate a bit more effort on energy efficiency, because the two go hand in hand very well. And that therefore gives us a new political driver to push the energy efficiency agenda. The commissioners for the European Union countries, London is a different story these days, sadly, but for the rest of the European Union countries, there is the Social Climate Fund, which is being focused on the poorer, low-income households, and the aim of that quite significant fund, which is going to be filled or replenished by the emission trading system's revenues, that should actually be used together with member states funding, of course, to reduce the energy poverty. And there are challenges. I mean, we've had a new definition of energy poverty in the latest Energy Efficiency Directive, but it's a very loose definition. And the reason for that is that every member state defines its poverty in different ways. And of course, they have different contexts for the poorer people in their countries, and they have different existing mechanisms for supporting their own low-income people. So it has to be a little bit elastic. But I think it's very important that this is focused on, because only by encouraging that end of the spectrum can we somehow show that the rest of us have to pull our weight and reduce our consumption. And yeah, I mean, there's no perfect answer to this. You're absolutely right that it's not easy. I think communication is crucial. And if we can show that we're committed to supporting the poorer ones, then the wealthier ones might be encouraged to do a little bit themselves.
Thank you. That was a good start for the whole of the seminar. So the whole of the webinar. So can we now move on to the first panel? We have three of IENE's partners with us. I want to just check that they're all here, that we have IENET Purucha here.
Hello.
Good. And that we have Mihailo Mihailovic here. Good.
No, Mihailo is not participating. He could not make it, but Yurdagul is here, and Alexia Tasuli is here, who is a new associate of our institute.
Oh, Alexia.
Hello, I'm a diplomatic correspondent, and I'm covering energy affairs in Greece.
That's fine.
Hello.
Okay, so we can start with Ionet, and then can we move on to Yudikal, and then come to you, Alexia? Does that work fine?
Perfect.
Then I'll start with Ionet Puricha, who has been
Purika, yes.
Purika. I will apologize for my
It's coming from an old Greek family that flew from Constantinopolis after the Turkish conquest. Purikas. Okay, let me give you some.
I also introduced you and just say that you have been a member of the Prime Minister's Ecological and Environmental Advisory Council.
Can you?
And Romania is very interesting at present. Thank you.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. What I want to tell you are a few results. Actually, Bill has mentioned the main elements of energy security. I'm one of the members of the group that is actually doing that under his guidance. And one thing that I wanted to, so a few things that I wanted to show you are a few results that we have applied to Romania. And the thing is that Romania has a sizable number of rivers and Danube. So hydro is very developed there, both on flow of the Danube with iron gates 1 and 2, and lake and cascades, as you see. Second, there are a number of thermal power plants, and don't forget that Romania has got lignite reserve and brown coal. It has got gas reserves. It has got heavy fuel oil. Actually, it was the first country in 1857 that reported 275 tons of refined fuel oils. Also, there's a nuclear power plant with 2 units in Chernavoda. And we are now having a sizable network, a grid, but we are still working on let's say, investing more in certain portions of the grid. For example, the nuclear powers in Dobroja, or close to the Black Sea, on the Danube, are also completed or have got in the same area a lot of wind power development. And obviously, one needs to increase the capability of the net of the grid to extract that power to the rest of the economy. Interesting to say is that we have in the last years exported electric energy to Ukraine and Moldova due to special operations that are going on down there, actually to the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and the fact that Moldova is now going toward becoming a member of the European Union. This just to show you a little the context of the situation. And if you go on Transelectrica, www.transelectrica.ro, you will see, this is an example, that the generation in Romania is, let's say, well distributed in between hydro, nuclear, hydrocarbons, coal. We have a sizable amount of wind parks and photovoltaics. Also, some a small biomass power plant, and we are now starting to invest into energy storage, as you see. The interesting thing is that having this type of distribution of power sources increases the security of the energy generation in Romania. And the idea of shutting down coal has got to be taken with some salt and pepper, as we used to say, because we would rather invest into innovation for clean coal technologies instead of putting away an important resource of energy generation. There are various types of energy security requirements, both by European legislation and national legislation. They are now put into a strategy of energy, the last energy strategy that we have up to 2030 and 2050. One thing that we've been doing is to understand how much reserve one needs in order to be resilient to increase of volatile energy sources. So what we did, we have, for example, data on the Danube flow and on precipitations. For a long time, Danube flow starts in 1845 and precipitations at least starting in, let's say, 1961 to 2011, we have the application here. We find out the standard deviation, the average and the standard deviation, and one standard deviation down gives a measure of the potential risk and the need for more available power as a reserve. This is the Danube, as I told you, one picture of iron gates and the distribution of the Danube flow. It's very clear that this also needs backup power because the on-flow in times of drought, of strong drought, is influencing the balance of power. Wind, the same thing with the average wind velocities, as you see. I told you about Dobroja, the red area where we have a lot of wind parks now. Also photovoltaics. The idea is that we've been considering the needed power to cover up these one standard deviation of the distributions and put out into a model, actually a model that I was using as a project officer in the World Bank on energy infrastructure and climate change. We find out that we need investment. Obviously, the figures are just examples. And about one new nuclear unit, just to give an idea, of 600 or 700 megawatt to cover up for the reserve. Then let me talk about the geostrategic area in which we are now finding ourselves. And since the old Silk Road pipelines, like that were actually looked at in the Traceca and Inogate project of the European Commission, are starting not to be exactly very available nowadays, we were thinking, and there is a 3 Cs initiative, to propose a power pipeline of gas that would actually go from Finland to Greece, passing through the countries in the eastern part of Europe. And obviously this may increase the capability of security in this part. Obviously, Romania is one of the countries with large still offshore and onshore gas reserves. Greece is developing some liquefied gas reservoirs, also Poland. Finland depends 100% on Russian gas up till now. Maybe we can correct that, like the Baltics also. One other thing is climate change risk. We have, I told you, a lot of big data available on temperatures and precipitations, averaged for each of the Romanian counties. There are 41 counties. Considering a risk event tree with high temperatures and high precipitations, we can visualize the probabilities for floods. High temperatures and low precipitation, probabilities for drought. Low temperatures under zero and high precipitations is snow, and low temperatures, low precipitation is freeze. We have all this, and the idea is that what we can do is putting all these risks together as a climate change risk, and try to think of a potential policy of insurance at the level with various primes, insurance primes for each county, to be prepared in case of, let's say, evolution of climate change risks. One other thing is to assess the impact of these risks on, for example, gas grid. And I've been doing something like that some time ago in Italy for Enea. And you have it on the right. And on the left, you have the same application, this time with not only earthquake and landslide that we did for Italy, but also but climate change risks that was calculated before that. Let me say that it was important, and Dr. William Gillette has mentioned it. We have, for example, various models to apply to energy evolution. This is a message from IAEA. When I was the president of the Romanian Nuclear Agency, I brought this model to Romania and implemented it, such that we can analyze various scenarios. And also the model can, let's say, take into account various technologies with their moments of potential penetration, resources needed, and so on. So there is a capability to model energy technologies penetration. In conclusion, we need about 1,000 megawatts to cover up for as a reserve to cover up for volatility of various new renewable and so on energy sources. In the recent COP29 in Baku, contract was signed to finance and finalize the units 3 and 4 in Chernavoda, Candu units, 700 megawatts each, and also some small modular reactor in a different location in Doicești, more to Târgoviște, the northwest of Bucharest. One interesting thing is that Romania, together with Italy and others, consortium has been made, is developing a lead-cooled fast breeder reactor that would actually be needed to use to further use the nuclear fuel that was passed through the Candu reactors, and that has got a lot of energy potential continuously. And so we are developing something that not only will produce energy, but will actually diminish the nuclear waste that obviously should be deposited in Romania, and deposits are also under development with a fund that is replenished by 2 euros per megawatt hour sold by the nuclear power plant. Let me talk a little about transport. And the moment we saw electric vehicles in a frenzy that is now a little calmed down, we thought, hey, we have now a level of generation that is covering the present consumption. If all transportation in Europe, as an exercise, will actually pass from fossil fuels to electric, how much more generation will have to be done, to be constructed, such that to cover that. And believe me, it's not a very small level of power. Take it as an exercise. I can give you some figures if you want. Electrical buses that can be used in various areas where the loading of batteries may be done with photovoltaics or even wind, or not only network at the end of the line. The buildings, I'm not going to detail on that. Bill has already talked about what we need to do about diminishing building consumption. You have here some analysis of thermal imaging of heat loss from some buildings in a relatively small city. And the interesting thing is that the mayor, when we've been doing this analysis, it resulted that a payback time at the current investment would take about 8 years to insulate the buildings. The government was covering 50% of the investment, and that reduced more or less to 4 years the investment, the payback time. When the mayor heard about 4 years, he says, this is an electoral term. It's very good. We want to do it. Just as an example on how various decision makers are perceiving these type of demand side actions. Obviously, the one thing that I'm having as a message, and I really published a book on that in Elsevier, it's the fact that if we continue to approach climate change as a fight, instead of using our intelligence in the sense of getting to harmonize our existence with nature, to innovate such that the waste of today will be transformed into benefits of tomorrow, into resources of tomorrow, we may have a strange syllogism, a logical syllogism, in the sense that we say anthropic cause are producing a lot of emission, we should fight emissions. That means that we should fight anthropics. That means we should fight ourselves. At the extreme, there is what I call the Russian solution or Putin solution that says that a sufficient number of atomic bombs will actually drastically reduce the cause of anthropic emissions, and the nuclear winter that will follow will reverse the temperature increase. Do we really want that, or do we want not to fight nature, but to harmonize with it as a message? That means we have to go into circular economy. That is a shift of the way we look at how we interact with nature and how we prepare our future. And that is all that I wanted to tell you today. And I thank you. And obviously, there is a lot of other things, but I thought that some practical results, some calculations and analysis would add to our general view on what we should do in terms of energy security. Thank you.
Professor Purica, thank you very much indeed, both for being practical and for exhorting us to work with nature. That is, again, an immense element in the combination approach we need to take towards both sustainability and energy security. And somehow, of course, we have to do it in an affordable manner. Our next speaker is Professor Yodigal Yegudin, who is an energy expert from Turkey. I have known him for, I think I can now say, many decades. He was once the environmental and ecological coordinator at the OSCE in Vienna and is now an analyst based in Turkey. So, Professor Yegudin, the floor is yours, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Kostis. Dear colleagues, I'm honored to share my thoughts with you this early evening. The last 4 or 5 weeks was a real festival of joy for all political analysts. They had so much to comment and analyze, unbelievable. So Ukraine started to launch US-made ATACMS missiles. Russia answered with hypersonic Oreshnik missile. War in Lebanon now temporarily stopped with a ceasefire. War in Gaza is continuing with some hopes for new ceasefire. US spelled out unilateral sanctions on the last functioning commercial bank in Russia, the Gazprom Bank, and expiring agreement between Russian Federation and Ukraine on gas transit is also critical for the future of gas supply. Same time, it's not enough. In Syria, civil wars erupted. Within 1 week, HTS moved very swiftly to the south, capturing Damascus. SNA moved to the east. PYG SCF moved to the east and southeast with support of the US Air Force. Israel extended its territory at Mount Hernon region. So important is EU and Turkey also should help Syria to build up a functioning state and rebuild the country for future peace in the region. This can affect also the Southeast Europe. Not so much by oil. Oil is less sensitive in this regard only if Iraq plans to enter a full-fledged war in Syria against the new powers there. The oil markets will not be very sensible, but on the side of natural gas, the sensitivity is much higher. And my country, Turkey, is at the top of the list affected in this regard. Turkey is planning a pivotal role in Southeast Europe in natural gas supply. Not only as the largest consumer with over 50 BCM demand, also supplying natural gas markets in Southeast Europe with exports and with transit of natural gas. Turkey was 55% dependent on Russian gas 10 years ago. So with successful diversification efforts, this percentage reduced to 42%, from 55 to 42%. It's still high. And who were the suppliers next to 42% from Russia? Azerbaijan with 20%, or 20%, Algeria with 12%, Iran with 11%, and USA with 8% in 2023. So these 5 countries make up over 98% of supply, natural gas supply to Turkey. And Turkish efforts are continuing. Beginning of 2023, Turkey signed a contract with Oman to supply 1 million tons of LNG starting next year. And this year, 2024, were also a lot of contracts and negotiations. In May of this year, an MOU with ExxonMobil has been signed by BOTAŞ to import 2.5 million tons of LNG yearly. Then in September, quite recently, beginning of September, a contract with Shell has been signed for 4 BCM annually imports, LNG imports, but starting in 2027. And similarly, mid of September, with Total Energies to import 1.6 BCM LNG, starting also 2027. So Turkey may need quite a time to reduce further the Russian gas imports. And in this regard, I think it's Turkey will ask for a waiver of the sanctions. Otherwise, it will be terrible. Either we go back to the Stone Age, start with the barter business again, or we leave the people in the cold. When we look this year, 2024, so imports of Turkish natural gas imports are less compared to 2023, 1.5 BCM the first 9 months less, but the exports increased quite well. So in the first 9 months, Turkey exported about 1.4 BCM natural gas, mainly to Bulgaria, Hungary, Serbia, and Northern Macedonia. And also the indigenous gas production is increasing. The first 9 months, the production increased to 1.5 BCM, especially coming from the deep sea Sakarya field. So these are my thoughts for the beginning. If there are further questions, I will be happy to answer them and to discuss with you the issues relevant for today. Thank you very much, John.
Can I just ask one question immediately, which is, how is the Sakarya development going? How is Sakarya development going?
Slow but steady, I would say. So the critics say it should be much faster. This was also announced in the past, but I think they had some problems cleaning off the gas. And so it's moving much slower than expected, but it's increasing.
John, I have a question to
Yes.
Yurdakul. Hi, Yurdakul.
Right.
Now, you mentioned that Turkey could play a pivotal role, as you said, in energy supply in Southeast Europe. And this is understandable because of the great volume of gas. It has the experience, the extensive network, and the fact that you have so many inputs from different sources and origin. Now, my question is, given the EU governance and laws concerning the natural gas market in EU countries and also in non-EU countries in Southeast Europe, like Western Balkans, with Turkey having a different system in terms of governance and regulation, how easy could this be? That is, to supply the rest of Southeast Europe.
So if there is a crisis, if there are problems for supply problems in the region, I don't think that there will be much problems from Brussels side, because you have to solve those problems. You need to be innovative in this regard. I don't expect that they would say, let our member countries in cold and don't buy from Turkey because they don't
comply with EU.
Key.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yes.
John, we can't hear.
We don't hear you.
Kostas, how do people who wish to ask questions from the audience submit a question? Have you got, what is the system?
No, I think first of all, we should let all participants complete their remarks and then come back to the audience.
That's fine, but I was simply asking, what is the system for audience members who wish to make to ask a question? Right. Fine, okay. Thank you. So our next speaker then is Alexia Vasili. And
hello.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. Of course, it's an honor for me to be in the panel. I understand that, and I know that you're all experts on energy, so you have very deep knowledge academically. So I will focus on what it was pointed out earlier on how important is communication, since I'm a journalist, I'm a diplomatic correspondent, and the communication, which is the need to reduce energy demand, and then it's linked directly to energy security. I will focus on the communication perspective. Of course, there are challenges, and each member state has its own agenda. Therefore, it's difficult to deliver a common message. And as the previous speakers said before from Turkey, we have to be innovative to figure out solutions. What I will say is that all the international media around the world are covering that we're witnessing a surge in energy diplomacy at the forefront of state diplomacy in the wider region. I was in the Doha forum this week in Qatar, and although the developments in Syria was the main issue, nevertheless, the energy affairs, the energy matters, since there were many countries involved there, was discussed in the sidelines. I'm saying that because Qatar has added energy to its arsenal of diplomatic ambitions. Qatar, as they said, they have committed to funding the Gas for Gaza project. Qatar is increasingly active in gas geopolitics with interest in Ghana gas field in Lebanon, following the 2022 Lebanese-Israeli Maritime Agreement, and Cyprus, of course. And this discussion was included in the general context in the forum. And it was said that before the attack by Hamas on Israel on October 7th, 2023, which triggered the ongoing conflict, Israel and various Arab states, including Lebanon, Iraq, and the Palestinian territories, attended a regional climate change meeting organized by the Egyptian government at the COP27, the summit in November 22, to promote cooperation in addressing climate change. That was said by all the journalists who were there. That every such initiative can play an important, the forum Sergei Lavrov was.
Are we losing the signal?
We don't hear, I think.
Recording in progress.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I'm still there? Yeah, sorry for that.
Yes, we hear now.
Sorry. What I would like to say that so the media has focused a lot on Russia regarding the energy affairs and what the Russian Gazprom has attempted to gain a foothold in Israel Radas gas field, but due to Israeli national security concerns, and we all know the relations between Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin. So what I would like to say that the media play a crucial role in covering energy affairs, acting as intermediary between policymakers, industry stakeholders, and the public, of course. So it's responsibilities for us, for the journalists, include informing, educating, and influencing public opinion and decision-making about energy-related issues. So I believe that there are three reasons for why we should focus more on energy affairs and be more professional, and definitely taking into consideration your remarks. For the first reason, that's complexity. Energy issues are often technically, making accurate and comprehensive reporting very difficult. The second reason is bias and influence. Media outlets may be influenced by advertisers, political agendas, or corporate sponsors, leading to biased reporting. The third reason is misinformation. The spread of misinformation about energy technology and climate change can undermine public understanding and policy initiatives. So to conclude, therefore, because I understand what you said, it's very important to keep on talking, to keep on being present with your reports, focusing these roles effectively, your roles. The media, I believe, have a very powerful tool, and they can contribute significantly to a more informed and engaged public, facilitating better decision-making and fostering sustainable energy practices globally. Thank you.
Alexia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, I'll make a little brief contribution at this point, which is to cite your problem on communication.
Mm-hmm.
I know that a very respected broadcaster made an absolutely, what I think, a disastrous mistake in its reporting.
Who is one? Who journalist?
BBC reported,
BC.
It reported that Azerbaijan had essentially been working to sign gas deals during COP29.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave no context. It didn't say, despite it being pointed out, it repeated this for several days afterwards, that Azerbaijan has always said it is pursuing both the development of gas and the development of renewables. It has never made any attempt to hide it. So you can criticize Azerbaijan for saying it shouldn't develop gas, but the excitement of discovering, as you see, look, the Azerbaijanis are wanting to sell gas, treating it as if it is something new, rather than something that the Azerbaijanis have said absolutely consistently for the last 5 years alongside their development of renewables. And that's why I think communication is crucial, and that requires a responsibility to put it in context. I've got no problem if you wish to say Azerbaijan is wrong to focus on gas. That's illegitimate. What you can't say is that, look, I've just discovered this, because it's been out there for 5 years. Thank you.
I totally agree with you. Making mistakes on such crucial matters, and especially coming from very big media who have a large audience, it's a very big mistake. I agree with you. Information is critical on energy sector for ensuring efficient, sustainable, and equitable management of resources. Therefore, it's important for us to scan, to be very careful across decision-making, innovation, and public engagement. And therefore, we should also be very careful on who we listen to, who is saying what, and how accurate is that kind of information, especially when energy is a very sensitive matter and requires a lot of deep, thorough, and be educated from us as a journalist all over the world. Thank you.
Alexia, thank you very much indeed. Now, do we have questions from elsewhere for the panel? Then may I go back to
your point?
Yes.
To your point, you mentioned, since Alexia just spoke, this is really a mess when the media uses some figures or some news for their political, say, commitments. So I'm now, since 2-3 days, fighting against it here. Well-known professor at a TV show, he calculated all the feed-in tariffs to be paid and to be paid to the private sector in 2 decades, and mentioned it as a corruption of the government. So much money is distributed to the private sector. Everybody's asking me, and I say this is to explain it, that this is a best way to develop renewables, and the figures are not that high. But this is happening, unfortunately.
Yedikal, thank you very much indeed on that. I'd like to ask Professor Parikh a question, which is, we know that there's been, I don't know how one phrases it, a political change, in the sense that the first election round has been cancelled. Are we talking about a fundamental problem with Romanian stability, or is Romania more stable than the headlines would appear? And what are the implications for energy?
Okay. Just to remind those who weren't reading the latest news, in Romania we had this year a lot of elections, local elections in spring, presidential election, European Parliament elections like everybody else, presidential elections that were supposed to take place 2 weeks ago, past Sunday, and the past Sunday. In the first tour of elections, one candidate that actually came out as an independent and it seems was sustained or supported on TikTok network. It's or social network came out to be voted by about 2.1 million voters, while the other candidates were at 1.7 and lower. The last two candidates, actually, it was said that this independent candidate was somehow connected to Russian intervention in Romania and so on. It was a big fuss in the media, but the country is operating normally, and the energy is ongoing as usual, the energy system and the market. Now, what is happening is that at a certain moment, the High Court of Constitutional Court has approved the votes after asking for them to be renumbered. And finally, at exactly when the votes were starting, the second row of votes, the second tour of voting, starting in outside Romania, and this past Sunday, it was supposed to be done in the country. The Court of Constitutional Court has canceled all elections and said, okay, we will restart the process. Parliamentary elections have already taken place, so we are waiting for the parliament to make the necessary alliances such that to put out a government, a prime minister and a government. The present president is waiting for the presidential elections to actually finalize his mandate. But as I'm looking around into the economy is ongoing okay, especially energy. And I am actually remembering two cases. One case is Italy, where the public belief in the political class has been diminished in the center of political spectrum back in after the fall of the Soviet Union, and Berlusconi, with 3 television sets, has put out Forza Italia, and in a matter of 3 months has covered this empty political center. The second thing is what is actually happening here is that there is a diminish of credibility of the politicians, of present or past politicians, to the public. So probably this emptiness will be filled with something new, regardless of whoever is, which social network is supporting him. Clearly, for the moment, there is not a sizable effect, economical effect, and obviously there is no nothing in energy. Let's remember that Romania has got some sort of tariff limit, upper limit, for the residential, such that to cut the potential increases, absolute abnormal increases in prices, because there is a very sizable difference between the prices in East Europe of energy, of electrical energy and gas, and the prices in the Western Europe. So for the moment, my feeling is that somehow we will have the government relatively soon, in due time, and then presidential elections are announced in March, somewhere in spring. Let's not forget that Belgium was 473 days without a government, and the economy went sometimes better than with the government. I'm just joking, but you know, the idea is that we are actually seeing a new generation that is asking for some new political class or new political persons that are actually shifting the old habits. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that we're now in a position to move on to the next panel. Can I thank Professor Parika? Can I thank Dr. Gudin, Alexia Vasily? Thank you very much indeed, all of you. And I'll try and work on something for summing up later. Many thanks. Over to you, Kostas. Should be. We're waiting for the next panel. Christos, are you going to take over?
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, John, indeed. Okay, we entered to the second session. I think. Okay, sorry. They told me to start just in a few seconds.
Μια παρέμβαση, Χριστό, τη δική μου, ο Σπανίδης ο Φίλιππος είμαι, τη δική μου την παρουσίαση θα την κάνω share από εδώ, έτσι.
Αυτό να συνοήσουμε τα παιδιά, έτσι.
Ναι, θα την κάνω από εδώ γιατί, θα την κάνω από εδώ, ναι.
Λοιπόν, είμαστε έτοιμοι τώρα. Okay, good evening to everybody. We're entering to the second session, and I think it's going to be an interesting session like the first one that we saw, and we heard a lot of very interesting issues. Let me first express very shortly some thoughts which might help to our discussion in this second session. As it is known, the energy sector and its policies may be analyzed through different angles: economic, environmental, and geopolitical. The geopolitical approach to energy refers mainly to energy security, which in most cases appears to dominate energy policy. One of the key factors to enjoy energy security is the absence of geopolitical risks due to geopolitical events. The more turmoil in geopolitics, the less confidence in energy security. And this is exactly what happens nowadays, and particularly in East and Southeast Europe, and thus in the entire region of Europe. Indeed, the current conflict zones or the high-risk zones around the world are in Ukraine and Russia, Gaza, Israel and Lebanon, Syria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Yemen, Red Sea, Gulf of Aden, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and some in Africa, Sahel, Sudan, Ethiopia, Libya, and of course in the Straits of Taiwan and South China Sea. All these points of fight, except the Taiwan case, belong to the broad area of Eastern Mediterranean region and of Eastern and Southeastern parts of Europe. And this exactly area of East Mediterranean, together with Arab Gulf countries, is the area that plays a pivotal role in European and in global energy security because of the existing energy resources and energy supply routes. These current conflict zones may be easily expand and affect even more East and Southeast Europe. Because of this, and because of the characteristics of these undergoing wars, mainly in Ukraine, there is a great worry throughout Europe. I would like to refer as an example that a top NATO military official just a few days ago urged businesses to start preparing for a wider war scenario and adjust their production and distribution lines accordingly to be less vulnerable to blackmail by Russia, China, or other countries with the same attitude. Along this line, we have to think that in a more general consideration, the West and particularly the United States of America somehow have lost ground geopolitically. And by that, we don't mean the decline of the American power, but rather the rise in the behavior of other countries which have gained some kind of political confidence by defying both USA and Europe. So, the energy. Amid such geopolitical transformation and amid this global political turmoil, there are certain European energy issues seeking particular attention and proper solutions, the main of which are energy security and the energy prices. Europe must reduce further its energy dependence by increasing the efforts to develop even more the domestic energy sources in order to enjoy energy security. But despite there was an excellent progress regarding the development of renewables in the region, this alone is not sufficient to provide a reliable energy security for the transition period ahead. In view of these high energy security requirements, the issue of decarbonization acquires in dimension. So the key issue in the present situation is how to be able to reconcile increased energy demands with the need to advance at the same time decarbonization policies as per EU strategy and of course enjoying acceptable energy prices. Among the European countries, the Southeast European member states have the biggest problem in this direction because they are still struggling with dysfunctional energy markets and an overwhelming dependence on fossil fuels. So these are some thoughts that we can discuss and in our discussion. And having said that, I would like to, it's the time to open the discussion in this second session and to give the floor to our first speaker, Amit Mor from Israel. Amit Mor is an ENA partner, and we have discussed in the past a lot about the energy security. And Amit, we are going to listen to you with great interest. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Christos, and hello, Kostis, John, all the good friends, many of whom we know very well and meeting frequently. So good evening to all of you. 14 months into the war, here in Israel with 8 fronts, and the geopolitical framework is changing rapidly in the area, as you all know. 2 weeks ceasefire in Lebanon with a very weakening Hezbollah, hopefully a chance to rebuild Lebanon in the long run and reshape the internal geopolitics there. Very highly weakening Hamas in Gaza, still an ongoing low rate war there. Rapidly changing the political scope in decreasing, eliminating the regime of Assad in Damascus in the past few days, which was unbelievable until very recently, and altogether weakening the Iran itself and its coalition. So with all that in mind, we still missiles coming from the Houthis in Yemen to Israel, over close to 30,000 missiles in 14 months launched on Israel. Very few were indeed were not intercepted or fell in empty spaces. And altogether, almost no damage to energy supply at all. Very high risk to energy security, but very well, to sum up, very good preparation in terms of military protection, focusing on critical infrastructures, the anti-missile missile systems, Iron Dome and other systems, and very good, I would say, protection against cyber attacks, especially from Iran, on critical infrastructure, on power plants, on water desalination plants, on the grid itself, on the natural gas network, on the gas platform production facilities, and so on and so forth. No damage in this respect. So preparations is a must, and they prove themselves. So except for very, I would say, local damages to electricity networks in towns by Hezbollah missiles, which were repaired in no time, in a day or two, or in the Gaza region, I would say that the resilience of the Israeli energy system and other water infrastructure proved itself in this war, though with a very high cost. I mean, the military preparations and systems and cyber security systems, we estimated at around close to $2 billion, which is a lot, taking into account that about 25,000 installed capacity, megawatts of installed capacity, 20,000 megawatts of carbon-based, especially natural gas-based turbines, and additional 6,000 megawatts of solar energy. That's the energy mix of Israel. So just to put $2 billion in preparation, military and cyber security versus an annual turnover of about $10 billion of the energy system. So $2 billion, which were invested, I would say, in 10 years' time. So I would say it's a relatively low price to achieve energy security. And many missiles were launched by Hezbollah, especially also by Hamas, towards the gas platforms of Israel. 3 gas platforms, 3 fields, which supply 70%, the gas supplies 70% of the electricity. Also, gas from one of the fields, Leviathan fields, supplies 70% of the electricity production of Jordan and 15% of the gas of Egypt. So Jordan's supply of gas to Jordan was not interrupted. Some gas supply to Egypt was interrupted because the government, the defense ministry, ordered Chevron, the operator of the fields, to shut down one of the platforms for 5 weeks, just to protect the platform from Hamas missiles. Because if a platform is hit by a missile while operating the gas, and treating the gas, the damage can be much higher. Also, tens of people work on such an offshore platform. So that's the reason for shutting one platform for 5 weeks at the beginning of the war. And Egypt, in fact, supply of gas to Egypt was interrupted. So I would say that only Egypt suffer some loss of electricity generation because of this war. So now, what's the lessons that we learned? It's like a textbook, and I think that Bill Gillot presented it as I present it usually to my students as well. I would say backup and redundancy of backup fuels in terms of electricity supply. So the backup fuel for gas in what we call combined cycle gas turbines or gas turbines, peakers and so on, is diesel. So what Israel did at the beginning of the war, not enough, but increased the strategic reserves of diesel as a backup for power generation, just in case gas supplies would cease. Especially, we were, or the worst case scenario was that the government, defense ministry, will order Chevron and Energean, which operates one of the fields, to cease production, stop production, just to protect the platform. Needless to say, a hit of one or more of the platforms. So backup fuels and also coal, and Israel in this respect hold a world record in shifting out of coal to gas and renewables. From 80% coal in power generation only 10 years ago, now it's 15%, and we're going to be phased out totally by the end of the decade, shifting those coal steam turbines to gas with a coal as a backup. So to maintain coal as a backup fuel. So backup, increased strategic reserves of backup fuels is a must. So we said first, most important thing, prepare strategic reserves of the alternative fuels, of the backup fuels and redundancy of those fuels, and which are diesel, and increase the backup, the storage of coal in this respect. One thing, of course, physical protection, military protection, as we discussed, and a lot of efforts to mitigate, as Bill and other speakers mentioned, cybersecurity threats, which no doubt will increase with time. No doubt in my mind. And then the second largest, the most important other lesson that we learned, and we know we are speaking on that for a long time, is that distributed energy means energy security, means national security. In Israeli case, in our region, especially solar energy, we don't have much no hydro potential, no geothermal potential, almost no wind potential, only solar energy. So almost the only renewable energy source is solar. So in this respect, as more solar you have, because we cannot stop the sun. Once we have diversified renewable energy sources, plus storage. And so here the key issue is storage. And now all around the world, including in Israel, here thousands of megawatts of storage capacity is built, and we'll have, as now we have about 25,000 installed capacity, megawatt of installed capacity. We need about 15,000 megawatts of storage capacity these days, especially lithium-ion batteries in large-scale storage farms, and also what we call energy resilience at the household level. That is a solar panel plus domestic home size battery of 6 to 12 kilowatts. And once we have that in a large scale to serve a nation, large battery farms, storage farms on the one hand, and on the household level, and since the war began, tens of thousands, I would say probably 20,000, we don't have the exact numbers, of households purchased lithium-ion batteries and installed solar panels on the rooftops. So basically, to enhance energy security and energy resilience on the mini grids on the household level, this war gave a major push to the deployment of renewable energy plus storage. And I think it's a major lesson because we need to invest so many billions of shekels or dollars to protect gas supplies and the platforms and so on and so on. We can invest on the household level. And the most important issue is the financial mechanism to how to finance that investment, of course, on the general level of commercial companies, which are building thousands of megawatts of storage and, of course, of solar capacity. So the right signals or pricing mechanisms, I'm not going to get into that, but on the household level, how can we finance it? And that we put a lot of efforts during this wartime, and is going ahead, is this by the right pricing mechanism by the electricity regulator here, that the household can sell not only rooftop electricity, solar electricity by PV photovoltaic cells to the grid, but also by selling the capacity that is stored, electricity that is stored in the batteries at the peak demand hours, which is from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. winter and summer in Israel, to the grid. So once we have those converters and the ability to sell also stored energy on the household level to the grid, we have an excellent financial mechanism that households can get loans from the banks to those systems, which cost, let's say, from $5,000 to $20,000, that are not so cheap to mid-class household. So I would say that the need and the urgency and the understanding of the people that there is a need to enhance the energy resilience or energy security indeed pushed the deployment of renewables plus storage. And I think in this respect, although in a later stage, we are just doing what our neighbors in Gaza, in Lebanon, did already several years ago. There it was because of the energy crisis, electricity crisis in Gaza, and also in Lebanon, also in Yemen, because of various reasons, collapsed the economy of Lebanon, no supply of electricity. The Lebanon electricity company has ceased to supply electricity altogether in the past 6 months, and so on and so forth. So in the past several years, many people shifted to solar energy plus storage. So if they don't have money to purchase lithium-ion batteries, they purchased auto batteries in $100, several batteries like that, plus a solar panel on the rooftop to supply minimum electricity. And in this respect, that was a need from a crisis. People acted rationally in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen, because of lack of central electricity supply. So before the war, according to our calculations, 55% of the electricity in Gaza supplied by solar systems. Also to the tunnels of Hamas, some of the electricity was supplied from solar panels, as we learned. So in a developed country like Israel, that's what people are doing these days. So the government is pushing these policies on the one hand. If a nation wants to rely much on renewable energy, right now 15% solar energy, but will increase to 30%, most likely in 5-6 years' time, 40-50% renewable energy, while gas remain as a major energy source. So basically, another few words, energy resilience we spoke about. The most important thing that some of previous speakers spoke about, energy efficiency and energy saving, that is energy conservation. Of course, this should be the most important thing to do, the megawatts, the demand side management side of that. So I think that throughout the years, this was a priority for the government, but as many other governments to provide incentives, to provide the right pricing mechanisms, but hopefully the war is going to push also this most important source of enhancing energy security, environmental security in this respect, and especially with the introduction of higher and higher carbon taxation, which will enhance energy security on the one hand, the shift to renewables on the other, and also carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And here we are speaking on technological development, especially of the utilization of carbon dioxide. So pricing mechanisms like carbon tax is very, very important as well. And I will sum up my short presentation by talking about the climate change, but not the, but I will emphasize adaptation to climate change. We're doing a major work right now for the Israeli government on the energy and the water systems, how they should cope and prepare themselves, adapt to climate change. So I would say that there are many similarities in enhancing energy security measures also to climate adaptation, because climate is going to hit already, we're talking about 45 to 50 Celsius degrees in Tel Aviv in 15 years' time, like tomorrow, in this respect. So we need to prepare much redundancy, very high redundancy, and high reserves of electricity, I would say pickers, just to extreme weather in this respect, and also to deal a lot with demand side management policies. So in this respect, it is similar measures there that are needed to enhance energy security on the supply side are with the long-term environmental security or adaptation, not only mitigation tools to mitigate carbon dioxide, but also to adapt to climate change. There are many similar measures or policies that should be adopted at the same time. And I think maybe once Kostis, we can discuss it further in one of the webinars, because I see many similarities in the policies that we are suggesting to enhance energy security and to enhance also the environmental security and adaptation to climate change. So to sum up, energy security and environmental security we see the linkage between them, the shift to renewables, the shift to electric transportation, the rethinking about nuclear energy presentation, and of course, diversification of energy sources, backup and redundancy, all of these, including physical, military protection measures against missile attacks on the one hand and cyber attacks on the others. Thank you. And I apologize that I need to leave right now.
Okay, Amit. Amit, we thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. You gave us a very thorough picture of what is going on in the middle of war. And I just wrote down that you're going to prepare a textbook. I don't know, but a lot of lessons will come out from this situation for the energy community. So these lessons, I think that must be communicated to the energy community because they're going to be very interesting. I have a question for you. In this situation, with a lot of measures concerning the security of the energy situation in Israel, can you tell us what kind of impact you had in energy prices, if you had any? I mean, for the society.
So energy prices have not changed. The supply did not change. Gas prices are very low in the past 5 years since competition was introduced. 3 suppliers were competing, especially the entry of Energean, the Greek-British company, to supply gas from a relatively small field, but they dumped the prices, introduced competition to the other 2 suppliers, which are operated by one company, Chevron, reduce the prices to $4 to $5 per million BTU of gas. It's a relatively low gas price, which still remains. Will increase in time because they sold all of their capacity and will supply in the next decade, unless more gas is going to be discovered here end of this decade or next decade. So in this respect, electricity tariffs almost did not change. They will increase by 4% in January. As mentioned, there were costs of the war, especially the backup of diesel, additional quantities of diesel, additional quantities of coal as backup fuels, and so on and so forth, inflation, low inflation, but to take care of that. So electricity prices are relatively low here as well. So in this respect, electricity prices were not affected by the war.
Okay. Okay, Amit, I know that you have a need now to leave the webinar. So again, we thank you very much, and we move to our next speaker, who is Dr. Philip Mark Spanidis, project manager at Profos Engineering in Greece. Felipe,
Thank you.
the
Thank you,
floor
Mr.
is yours. I think that we have a presentation.
Yes, I have a presentation. I'll share it.
Okay.
1 minute. I would like first to discuss about some, just a moment. something wrong. Τώρα, μισό λεπτό. Εδώ είμαστε, έτσι. Ναι.
Okay, now we can see it.
Okay. Κάνουμε swap. Ωραία. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dimas. Thank you, colleagues of IGME for inviting me this webinar. Before starting presenting my speech, I'd like to say that it's a matter of fact that we're experiencing dramatic changes in the global scene. So we can see that after the elections in the United States, we have three main points to discuss about. Is that the new geopolitics landscape is underway after the election of Mr. Trump in the presidency of the United States. Second is that the geopolitical and the geostrategic events are fastest growing in the international arenas, especially in Middle East. The more recent event is the change of Assad's regime. And number three is that all the previous are expected to have crucial impacts and changes in the sectors and markets of energy and environment on a global basis, because energy and environment, as very correctly said the previous speaker, are associated and very, very strictly interlinked with each other. So under this viewpoint, my presentation has to do with presenting the reshaping of the global geopolitics and energy landscape after the elections in the United States. Of course, these last elections in the United States is an event of high criticality for the world system, not only for the United States. And on the grounds of the pre-election statements and slogans, and also taking into consideration the facts of the previous presidency of Mr. Trump, there are some key aspects for the new policies which are expected to be reshaped in the United States as follows. Starting from the main slogan, America First, it means that the United States will give priority to unilateralism and a reduction of the contribution of the United States in the multilateral agreements, which are in force till now. Second point is the tariffs and trade. That means renegotiation or escalation of tariffs by raising disputes with China, European Union, or other major economies. And the plan is that to have plus 60% for the Chinese product and plus 20% for products imported from other countries and sources. Military engagement. It is a lot of times addressed by the team of Mr. Trump for the reduction of the military presence of the United States on a global basis. Also, reconsideration of the relations with the United Nations and international trade agreements so far. Technology and cybersecurity. The United States will give priority to the technological decoupling from China, which is very, very critical for them. Extension of the business at the Earth space. There are the directions addressed by Elon Musk, and controlling of supply chains by developing systems of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Also important is the relations with adversaries. It is likely closer approach of the United States with Russia for reducing sanctions and arms control agreements, and with North Korea, with the regime of Kim, a new round of negotiations and is expected. This was happened in the previous presidency of Mr. Trump. Also, as regards to the war affairs, we expect to see reconsideration and or reshaping of the U.S. role and contribution as regards to Middle East and Ukraine conflicts. And finally, the immigration, the issue of immigration, we expect stricter immigration policies influencing labor markets and economic ties with the neighboring countries, especially for Mexico. Let's come to see what are the expected geopolitical developments. About the war of Russia and Ukraine, it was announced by Mr. Trump that we'll see a reduction of the United States military aid to Ukraine, and also in parallel to force a diplomatic solution for the war termination. This shift might force European allies to assume a greater role in supporting Ukraine. This is not an easy issue, but we need time to see how this will going on. So in the Middle East, paying attention to handling or lowering the intention of the conflict in the way. Also maintaining the hardline stance against Iran. This is a permanent policy of the United States as regards to Iran, and also diplomatic actions to investigate the socio-geographic options for the independent Kurdish state. This is an issue that a lot of discussion has been done in the recent months. Regarding China, we expect to see intensification of the commercial and geopolitical competition and discouraging of China's strategy regarding Taiwan's independence and political stability. In the Indo-Pacific strategy, we have to see rewarming of the cooperation lines with India, probably in the context, let's say, of rebalancing to Asia initiative, which is some years ago initiative that was not so, let's say, productive, but we expect to see that. Reforming of the regional stability and counter-China coalitions. And also NATO and European allies. Tension to allies for increasing the military contribution and costs. It was a lot of discussion about the European countries to reach the 2 or 3% for their gross net product for defense expenses and for military systems and so on. Also, we have changes in the energy landscape and environmental aspects. First, we can see what is the plans for the fossil fuels. We expect a resource nationalism by giving emphasis and priorities to the domestic oil and gas production, including the reopening of federal lands and offshore areas for exploration. Also, extending LNG exports and global influence of the United States energy economy. Regulatory rollbacks, potential extensions of the lifespans of coal and natural gas plants. We see that we're coming a little bit back in the time in order to expedite the use of the resources of the United States, rolling back of emission limits on power plants and fuel efficiency standards. Climate and environment, we expect rollback of United States commitments to international climate agreements. One of these is the Paris Agreement, the COP21, and reduced focus on green energy initiatives. Reconsideration of the renewable energy perspectives, pausing or halting offshore wind energy, a new project of renewable energy production. Strategies for critical raw materials and minerals. A special attention has been done during the pre-election period about this, with emphasis on domestic mining of critical minerals, and also reduction of the dependence on China for resources like lithium and other rare earths. And energy security, utilization of LNG exports as a tool of geopolitical influence, particularly in Asia and Europe. From the previous, we can see some critical questions and some maps clarifying the whole context. First of all, the war, Russia-Ukraine. Is Russia and Ukraine ready to discuss a diplomatic solution? This is not an easy answer. Depends not only from the United States, depends also from what Putin considered as beneficial for Russia and their interests and so on. In Middle East, is Israel in favor of accepting a solution for a Palestinian state in its territory? To my understanding, this is not feasible at this time, at the present time. Taiwan's choke point. Is a new war breakup in the South Pacific region possible? We can see a lot of actions of Chinese side, of People's Republic of China side, in order to promote their power and their military efficiency in the surrounding of Taiwan. India Middle East corridor. Is there any solid basis for implementing this initiative? Should the United States still support IMEC as a BRI's competitor? We can see downside of the slide, on the left side, the IMEC, and in the middle, you can see the forks of the BRI, of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is supported by China. Regarding the LNG, is the US capacity for LNG supply enough to cover the energy demand of the European Union, especially after the war, the breaking up of the war, Russia and Ukraine? European Union policies. Are the European Union green energy policies deals appropriate to face the changes in the European Union energy balance caused by the Russia-Ukraine conflict? How can the Arabic oil monarchies react to the new package of the United States policies? Is the establishment of an independent Kurdish state a likely scenario within the Middle East geopolitical complex from lab to land? Are there any border changes expected? For example, a new Yalta agreement after the recent blitzkrieg of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham? This is the questions, not easy answers. So this is the whole presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Did, for your presentation. You brought up very interesting points. You here raised a lot of issues regarding the global geopolitical situation and energy landscape. From the United States angle of view, we're going to discuss certainly and to prepare some questions about this, but now at the end of the session. But now I'm going to give the floor to our next speaker, who is Mrs. Stavri Dima, Independent Energy and Risk Assessment Consultant and DNA Partner from Albania. Stavri, can you hear me?
Yeah, here.
Okay. Thanks for coming. And the floor is yours. Okay. Do you have a presentation or are you going to deliver just a speech?
Yeah. I have sent the presentation, but refer to the previous discussion. I will propose not to make this long presentation.
Okay.
Like to make some important comments and to present some issues regarding the energy security in Albania.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
Because Albania is not, how to say, a big country with a big energy production, and its role in the region is not such important like the Israel or like the Greece and other countries.
Every country is important.
Yeah, but the role in the region. Anyway, I will present something short regarding the energy security in Albania. Energy security in Albania is an important issue, as the country has had a heavy dependence on oil-based fossil fuels and hydroelectric resources, while efforts to diversify sources and improve infrastructure are still under development. Some of the main factors affecting Albania's energy security are: first, dependence on hydroelectric power; second, diversification of energy resources; third, transport network and infrastructure; fourth, regional and international cooperation; five, national and international policy and regulation; sixth, energy security and energy prices; and the last, seventh, the role of renewable energy and other resources. For each of these factors, I can make a short, presentation for their role in the energy security of Albania. Dependence of hydroelectricity. Albania has an energy system largely based on hydroelectric, which account for about 95% of electricity production, local electricity production. Anyway, the local electricity production cover from 50 to 70% of the annual consumption of electricity in the country. So we have we are obliged to import from 30 to 50% of our needs for electricity consumption. This makes the system vulnerable to climate change, such as period of drought, which can affect energy production and cause electricity shortage. As regards the diversification of energy sources, to reduce dependency on electricity, Albania has taken steps to diversify its energy sources, such as investing in renewable energy, solar and wind power. However, the development of these sources is still in its early stage and has not yet reached a level that can guarantee full energy security. Third, transmission network is another challenge in the aging infrastructure and the assistance needed to modernize the electricity distribution and transmission network. Investments in this sector are important to prevent energy losses and to enable more efficient and reliable distribution. Albania has received international loans and assistance to improve this infrastructure. Regional and international cooperation. Albania is part of the Balkan energy market and has connection with several neighbors countries such as Greece, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Kosovo. This cooperation is important for energy security, as it is enable the important export of energy, helping to balance energy needs. Furthermore, Albania is part of regional energy project and has participated in initiatives to diversify energy sources. Energy security and energy prices. This is another factor, but I will stress a very important, that another concern is the dependency on energy import during periods of drought, which can increase energy prices and create social tensions generally. International energy prices and the influence of global markets are factors that can directly affect the country's energy security. Anyway, the Albanian government and the ERE have ensured stability in electricity prices. I can say that actually the electricity prices for households in Albania are the lowest prices in the region, our Western Balkan mainly region, but maybe in the Southeast Europe as well. The role of renewable energy and other resources. The Albanian government is continuing efforts for a better balance between the diversification of energy production sources, the security of energy supply, and the protection of nature and sustainable systems in order to increase domestic production, reduce level of technical and non-technical losses of electricity in the distribution network, as well as reducing the amount of imported energy to meet the demand for electricity in the country. Albanian government has approved some important decision to support using of households solar heating panels and solar photovoltaic panels for own using of electricity. In the other hand, in the public transport, Albanian government has supported the wider use of electric or green buses for the public transport, and especially in Tirana, the higher percentage of taxi cars are electric. In conclusion, Albania has great opportunities to improve energy security through investments in infrastructure, diversification of sources, and increase international cooperation. However, to achieve full energy security, it is necessary to address climate challenges, modernize production and distribution capacities, and ensure sustainable and diverse energy sources. To conclude, I can mention only three cases that has importance in the case of energy security. I can say that Albanian government for last years have agreed an agreement between the electricity production company of Albania, KESH, and the Kosovo electricity production company, KEK, to change electricity during in different periods, because the Albanian electricity generation is based on hydro, and so during the winter and springtime, generally we have an overproduction of electricity. And on the meantime, the Kosovo has based its generation in thermal power, in coal. So in the case that we have such overproduction of electricity, we can change this with or storage it in Kosovo as a product, not as electricity real. Another issue that I can mention is a new situation that we faced in last days in Kosovo, which not affect directly our country, but is a good example to consider the other situation regarding the energy security. For this, I can say that on last days there is terrorist attack in the water supply channel that used for using by the people, and this is important for cooling the thermal power plants of Kosovo. This situation has been very dangerous. It is not important which caused this terrorist attack, etc. But yet, yes, we can say that how we can consider different situations regarding the not only the climate changes, but terrorist attacks that cause this. And finally, I can say that in the case of Albania, the energy security will increase, will improve, if we, as Albania, will use the great possibility that offer us the Southern Gas Corridor. Because, as all of us know, TAP gas pipeline transit the Albania. So if we can use the possibility that offer this gas pipeline, we can improve the energy security. First, for gasification and for using of gas in all the other sectors, not only for heating, but for the industry and the power generation as well. But in the same time, we can use this possibility to offer improving of energy security and for the neighbor countries like Kosovo and Montenegro. So we consider the regional cooperation in the energy field is very important, very important. Surely in our Balkan region, but in the wider, we can say, in the Southeast Europe and in Mediterranean as well. Thank you.
Okay, Stavri, thank you indeed. And thank you again being with us. We heard what's going on with the energy sector in Albania. Certainly, I know that you follow what is going also in Europe and especially in Balkan region. So I would like to ask you, what do you think Balkans will manage to diverge from fossil fuels without affecting energy security and energy prices? Do you think that this is going to be done? I don't know. This question definitely has to do with entire Europe, but because in Balkans we have some more problems. So, what is your approach?
So, okay, this is a good question, really. As I know, and everybody know that in the region, except Albania, all the countries, Montenegro, Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, use coal for fossil fuels for electricity generation. But Albania is, how to say, the only country pure renewable, how to say, based on hydro. And last years we have a good energy production by solar parks, photovoltaic parks, and this is a real contribution to the energy or electricity production in the country. But I think that in our cases, this how to say, change of the using of fossil fuels for energy in general and for electricity generation especially will not affect, I believe, not affect our country, or how to say, will have not a big effect in the energy prices in our country. But in the other countries of the region, maybe, because they have a higher percentage of electricity based on fossil fuels, like Kosovo, for example.
Okay. Felipe, you present us a thorough analysis of. Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 A thorough analysis of how America of Trump is going to move ahead, and what is going to be its philosophy, its approach, etc. So, in general, are you optimistic or not about the future relations between EU, Europe, and United States?
Not optimistic, not pessimistic. Everything depends on the relations between the leaders of European Union and Trump. For example, we noticed the last weekend that, let's say, the reopening of Notre Dame in Paris, we have seen Mr. Trump and Mr. Macron together for this event. Maybe the same will be done with other leaders. The issue is that somehow Europe has to find the modus vivendi with the new, let's say, government of the United States in order to see what is closer each other and what is different. So anyway, I'll come back to that. You have very carefully and in the past in the committees of geopolitics, a committee of ENA was discussed about the Draghi, let's say, report. And this is a basis to understand better the European leaders how to do and how to come closer to the United States. Because a lot of issues are directed to this convergence, let's say. So it depends on the European leaders. Yes, for me it's clear. And of course, from the disputes or the maybe misunderstandings or whatever, how to say this, between the European leaders. If one country, for example, France, has to suggest to follow this way and Germany the other way, this have to be resolved. These problems have to be resolved.
Okay. Now I have a last question for both of you. I mean, you, Philip, and Stavri. I'm going to start with you, Philip, but it's the same question. Regarding the energy issues of Europe, what we have heard earlier from William, there are a lot to be done to different directions in order somehow to match this very complicated energy issue of Europe. And certainly there are needs for a lot of money with a lot of help to vulnerable people and households. So, do you have friend social reactions, which of course will make the whole situation more problematic, more difficult, with a lot of consequences?
Reactions, yes, but not to the limit. I don't expect reactions in a way of seeing turnovers or let's say changes or conflicts, internal conflicts. I don't expect this. But of course, what I expect to see is that to have diverging, even opposite perceptions about the issues of energy between Germany and the other countries. Germany, because Germany does not want to discuss anything about the other types of energy, nuclear or whatsoever, and maybe some other countries become closer to these solutions. For example, we know that France has the main part of the energy balance is based on nuclear power. I don't know what will be happen. Anyway, we have to find converging solutions and converging policies. Otherwise, the time will pass, we don't have money, somehow the money have to be found, and so on.
Okay. Davi, what is your approach?
I have the same meaning as regard this issue, but
it's a difficult issue.
Sure. But
my estimation is that we are going to see that, but I don't know.
Yes, sure. But there is a big difference between the situation in the main European country in Central and Northern Europe, how to say, like Germany, Austria, etc. But or Poland. But there is a difference between them and the small countries and the Mediterranean countries. It depends by the situation of the weather, because we have last years we have not the same weather like before 10 years or 20 years, and for that reason in Albania, for example, in the main cities where is located maybe 70% of the population, we have not need for a long time for heating, and so we have not how to say central heating in our country. Every except the hotels and how to say public buildings. But for households, we have using generally air conditioning. Okay. So this is the situation, and we have not need for more time. Okay. But to consider this situation to the vulnerable people in the country, I can say that this is considered in Albania. And our government has proposed to take a new decision to reduce the price I have mentioned that in Albania the electricity price is the lowest in the region and in the southeast generally. But the government has proposed to reduce the cost or the price for the family, which are composed only by the retired people.
Okay.
This is a good for not to have how to save bad situation in this area, but for the contribution of Albania in the region, I say that this is modest.
Okay, Stavri. Again, I would like to thank you very much for coming, and it is now the right time to switch back to John and Kostis for summing up and closing remarks.
Thank you very much indeed. I did have some sort of feeling. I mean, I'll start with the obvious, which is Bill Gillett reminding us of the overlap between energy security, sustainability, and affordability. He stressed that what was required was upfront investment. But there's a problem there, which is the reluctance of governments to put in that upfront investment on the level required to achieve the goals that they desire. There is a palpable disconnect. So in that case, the way that it was phrased, that one should think of this in terms of a pension, that you put the money in and you get the rewards over a longer period of time later on, that is the argument that has to be put both to governments and to corporations, but also to ordinary consumers when it comes to things like energy efficiency and insulating people's houses. So I was particularly taken by the comments that we had to look at distribution of energy. Amit Moore made this point very strongly. And in that context, storage. Amit mentioned using houses as storage, the very basics that we all have. We heard comments on the way of selling back to the grid the energy that is saved, the concept of stored energy from households being returned to the grid. This is exactly the kind of program that can be communicated to ordinary consumers and bring ordinary consumers on board in a way that helps them financially in the long run. The point is trying to make sure that it is also affordable in the shorter run. We had questions concerning, issues concerning energy prices, with Amit saying that in Israel they hadn't changed because the supply had not been changed. Supply levels had been maintained. That, of course, has not been true in Europe as a whole, where we have seen supplies collapse in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And although they have recovered very substantially, indeed remarkably substantially since then, we are still having to adjust, and we probably have another 2 years of adjustment still to go before we reach the next new balance. Mr. Spanides was talking about transition and the Trump impact. I think, however, there's one point that can be made there, which is we may be, and I hope this is true, underestimating the long-term impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, because that did provide a great big hunk of money for renewables development. And it's going to be very hard for Trump to halt that pipeline without having an awful lot of opposition from the very people he wants to see ensure the success of his administration. Ordinary people who are actually benefiting from it, even though they may be voting for Trump because they have yet to see the benefits. But take that benefit away from them and you get a heck of a reaction. So there are all sorts of issues, but perhaps the one that is most important is bearing in mind the relativity of all of these issues. There are times we put energy security right up at the top. There are times we put sustainability right up at the top. There are times we put affordability right up at the top. If you're in Africa, affordability is the first thing that comes to mind. In any of the developing countries, that's probably the most important thing. If you're in quite a few places in Europe, affordability comes to mind because the affordability is on the personal household. The idea that the country as a whole can afford, but needs to make it affordable for its people, that's often the big problem. So I'm going to end here and just say, I thought it was a very stimulating discussion. I particularly enjoyed the contribution from Mr. Dima in Albania, because there you have the crux of the problem as it impacts on ordinary people. And this is, as we face the question of whether we go to net zero, or whether, as was suggested by Mr. Gillett, that perhaps we are looking for a little wiggle room with regard to net zero, it boils down to what can ordinary people as well as governments afford. And that's a very difficult issue to tackle. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John, very much for helping us moderate this webinar, which was not easy in view of the diversity of the subjects which were discussed and the various degrees of interest, as you rightly pointed out in your closing remarks, which depends very much on where you are and when and all that. From my part, I wish to thank all speakers, panelists, for responding to our call at very short notice, I must say, because yes, this webinar was prepared in haste. We wanted to catch the spirit of the moment of what's happening right now with a lot of different developments happening at the same time. And I think the speakers are to be congratulated because they were very precise, very short on the presentations, and we got the crux of what they wanted to say. And I think it makes me feel a little easier having heard all the presentations and the discussions, in that in spite of the geopolitical storm which is engulfing Europe and all that, and the Middle East, there appears to be reasonable calm, which we see, after all, in price de-escalation. I mean, oil and gas prices are being right now de-escalated. And the responsible response by many governments and organizations like the EU. and energy community and so forth. So what we'll try and do is to organize the presentations and the video and release them as soon as possible, definitely before Christmas. So there will be a microsite where you'll be able to see all the presentations and also be able to watch the whole discussion via video. And I think that will be our most important contribution as an institute, trying to promote the dialogue and the transparency and the building up of the different views and participation from the different countries, which I think we have managed to achieve. And once again, I'd like to thank all of you for your warm response and immediate response. And hopefully we can meet together next year again in a different set and even more interesting topics to explore. So I wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and the best to all of you and your families. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Kostis. Thank you, many thanks.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.